Order. Order. I call Mr. George Galloway.
Ms. Brooke, the highlight of my parliamentary career was undoubtedly the wonder goal I scored for the House of Commons football team at the Stretford End at Old Trafford at the Manchester United Theatre of Dreams. The goal has, of course, passed into history, but less well known is the fact that the little inside forward who supplied the final pass in a move involving the legends Pat Crerand and Bobby Charlton, Sir Bobby Charlton, was the Minister of State whom I face in this debate today. We've always had civilized relations, indeed friendly relations, and I hope that they survive this next 30 minutes, for I'm going to have to say some pretty harsh things about the government's policy, and undoubtedly, as the Minister for the Middle East, he'll have to come in for his share of criticism. But there is nothing personal intended in that, as I'm sure he knows. The Minister is highly qualified as a Minister of the Crown, but the least of his qualifications was the most important qualification in being made the Minister of State at the Foreign Office. And it is this: he was previously a luminary, indeed a leader, of the Conservative Friends of Israel. And that is an indispensable condition in Britain. In the 25 years I have spent in the House, and I suspect very much longer than that, no one can be the Minister for the Middle East in Britain if they are not a member, preferably a leading one, of either the Labour or Conservative Friends of Israel. And that's the first problem I want to deal with today. It's the fact that you have to be a friend of Israel to be the Foreign Office Minister for the Middle East, which speaks volumes about the absolute unwillingness on the part of the British state, the British government, the British Parliament, to face up to its responsibility to the Palestinian people. It is the fact that in this building, the entire tragedy of the Palestinian people was authored when our Foreign Minister, then Mr. Balfour, promised on behalf of one people, a second people, the land which belonged to a third people, at a time when we didn't even possess the land of Palestine, even as an imperial possession. That is the original sin in Britain. All the blood that has flowed under the bridge since that declaration was made. And the fact that we don't recognize our special responsibility to the Palestinian people. On the contrary, you have to be a friend of Israel to be the Minister for the Middle East. That is central to our problems and to our credibility in the Middle East. The Palestinian people, as a result of that declaration by Mr. Balfour, had their country wiped off the map. We hear a lot of talk in the Middle East about people threatening to wipe other people's countries off the map. But the only country that has been wiped off the map in the Middle East is Palestine. Go to your atlas, Ms. Brooke, and you will see. The Palestinian people were scattered to the four corners of the earth, stateless, paperless, passportless, hunted from pillar to post, regularly subject to massacre and attack of one kind or another. And all of the responsibility for that originates here. Instead of recognizing that special responsibility, we do precisely the opposite. If you're not a known and celebrated supporter of the country which supplanted Palestine, drove the Palestinians out of their country into the four corners of the earth, then you have no chance to be the Minister for the Middle East. I could adumbrate the perfidy at very great length, but I don't have the time to do so. I shall give only one example. Israel illegally holds hundreds of nuclear weapons, undeclared, subject to no treaty, subject to no inspection of any kind. And it was a British government that transferred the heavy water technology that made that illegal acquisition of nuclear weapons possible. Would have been impossible otherwise. We know that Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons because the brave Jewish whistleblower Mordechai Vanunu told us, for which he was kidnapped in Leicester Square and ended up serving 18 years in solitary confinement in an Israeli dungeon. When brought to court, his jaws wired together like Hannibal Lecter, in case he told us any more about this illegal mountain of weapons of mass destruction. Israel has a mountain of weapons of mass destruction. Iran has no weapons of mass destruction. The IAEA says Iran has no nuclear weapons, and there is no evidence that it's trying to build them. Yet it is Iran that is subject to endless sanction and threat, whilst Israel endlessly has the red carpet rolled out before it. And successive British governments, I admit that the last one was even worse than this one. Mr. Blair is now in almost permanent residence in occupied Jerusalem. But both Labour and Conservative governments have consistently backed Israeli crimes or failed to properly sanction Israeli crimes. Even when our own citizens' passports were stolen by the Israeli intelligence service for the purposes of committing murder in Dubai, we called in the Israeli ambassador and deported the Mossad representative from the embassy in London, and on the return flight, the new Mossad representative to London flew here and is ensconced still. If this were a debate only about Palestine, I would have much more to say. But the proximate cause of this debate, or my application for it, is the ludicrous situation that occurred at Prime Minister's question time a couple of weeks ago. The Minister will have come briefed, I'm sure, for this point. I asked the Prime Minister if he would adumbrate for the House the key differences, just the key ones, the key differences between the hand-chopping, throat-cutting, violent, Islamist, extremist jihadists we were now going to go to Mali to kill, and the hand-chopping, throat-cutting, violent, Islamist, fanatic, extremist jihadists that we were giving money to in order to help them kill Christians and other religious minorities in Syria. There was a reply, but it was not an answer. It was a brief ad hominem attack that if there is a brutal Arab dictator anywhere in the world left standing, he could no doubt count on support from me. Well, as the psychologists say, Ms. Brooke, this is just about as good an example of projection as it's possible to imagine. The Prime Minister projected onto me the sins, indeed crimes, of which he himself is manifestly guilty. And I will.
One of the reasons why I voted against the Iraq war, like the Honourable Gentleman, was that I was worried about the fate of Christians in Iraq. And they've had a terrible fate since that invasion. Many of them went to Syria, and their life has been made a misery now. They are the people in between. So can he share my view that it's absolutely essential that we should not send or countenance indirectly or directly sending any arms into Syria, which could make the situation far worse?
Well, wholeheartedly, Ms. Brooke. And the Christians in Iraq have been effectively wiped off the map of Iraq. And most of them are in Syria, where they live in daily terror of their churches, their clergy, their devotees being slaughtered by these hand-chopping, throat-cutting Al-Qaeda elements that we are giving money to. But the Honourable Gentleman is wrong in this regard. We are already giving them weapons. We're giving them money, which is the same thing as giving them weapons. If you give Al-Qaeda money, what do you think they're buying with the money? Are they buying elastoplasts and other medical supplies. No, they're buying weapons with which to terrorize not just Christians, but other Muslims, other ethnicities, Kurdish people, for example, on a daily basis. The minister knows this. The Foreign Office knows this. And they have to give an answer. If not to me, then to the British people. What are the differences between the jihadists we're killing in Mali and the jihadists we're financing in Syria? And I know why the Prime Minister didn't answer my question. For there can be no logical answer, surely, to that question. For there are no differences. Al-Qaeda is Al-Qaeda. The Al-Qaeda mindset is the Al-Qaeda mindset wherever it is to be found. And I demand an answer to that question. The people in this country deserve an answer. After all, it's their money that's being given. And I said to the Prime Minister, I asked him, did you read Frankenstein? Did you read it to the end? Don't you know that Dr. Frankenstein's monster broke free and out of control? And that's why it's called a monster. But as a case of projection, it's really pretty difficult to beat. In The Guardian, an American journalist by the name of Glenn Greenwald, I think the day after, if not the day after that, wrote the following: Cameron's attack on George Galloway reflects the West's self-delusions. In an act of supreme projection, the British PM accuses a critic of lending support wherever there is a brutal dictator, the core policy of the US and the UK. Who can doubt that? The Prime Minister has travelled with his sales bag and a retinue of arms salesmen to one brutal Arab dictatorship after another. I don't know where he is today, but it'll be a red letter day if he's not trying to sell weapons to a brutal Arab dictator today. Saudi Arabia is our best friend in the Middle East. We sell billions, tens of billions of pounds worth of weaponry to the Saudi dictatorship, some of which are used in other countries. In 2009, the Saudi Air Force used UK-supplied Tornado fighter bombers in attacks in Yemen, which killed hundreds, possibly thousands, of civilians. The Saudi army is in occupation of its neighbor, Bahrain, where the democracy protesters are being gunned down on a daily basis using guns bought from us. Soldiers trained by us. We have a military training mission in Saudi Arabia, the darkest tyranny in the entire Middle East, the most brutal dictatorship in the entire Middle East, is in occupation of its neighbor, killing people because they demand the right to vote. I give way to the right honourable gentleman.
I'm most grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that actually, he mentioned Yemen, it is important that we work with the government of Yemen in order to defeat Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is causing so much damage and harm to the people there?
It is important that we work with the government of Yemen, which has come to power as the result of a popular revolution against a dictatorship supported by the British government. This one and the last one. But before I leave Saudi Arabia, we have sold £15 billion worth of weapons a year. According to a report I have here, Saudi Arabia, with whom we want to broaden and deepen the UK-Saudi relationship, is already very broad and deep and is the UK's largest trading partner in the Middle East, with annual trade worth £15 billion a year. How does the minister think people in Syria feel when they're told that we're giving weapons to jihadists to bring democracy in Syria, when our best friend in the region is the darkest tyranny of them all? I'm going to close, though, on the tragicomic, on the absurd on the subject of brutal dictatorships. I never met Muammar Gaddafi. I've never met any of his grisly family. I had nothing to do with Gaddafi or his regime, but the British government did. First he was a mad dog, then he was our new best friend. The Prime Minister of Britain kissed him several times in the tent. The LSE, the Libyan School of Economics, London School of Economics, was encouraged to take large sums of money from the Gaddafi dictatorship. Gaddafi's son had help from number 10 Downing Street to complete his PhD thesis so that he could become Dr. Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi. We had the closest possible relationship with Gaddafi's brutal dictatorship. We sold them £100 million worth of weapons. Worse than that, we sent them dissidents to be tortured on Gaddafi's torture tables. It wasn't me who sent them. It was the then British Foreign Secretary, the Right Honourable Member for Blackburn, as the courts will soon decide, though maybe in secret if the government gets away with its secret courts legislation. The letters are there. The man who was tortured discovered them in the British Embassy, gloating at his safe delivery to the torture tables of Gaddafi. It was the British government that was training Gaddafi's secret police and his military officers at Sandhurst. It's the British government that supports dictatorship in the Middle East, not me. I wish I had more time for this debate, but I don't want to cheat a minister whom I personally respect by leaving him too little time to reply. I just close with this, Ms. Brooke. Britain's relationship in the Middle East stinks to high heaven. Indeed, in the Muslim world, 1.7 billion strong, we're seen as hypocrites, as occupiers, as people who support and prop up these brutal dictators with weapons, with money if they need it, with diplomatic and political support if they don't. It's a pity that this foreign minister, fine man as he is, has done nothing to better that reputation. Instead, his tenure has seen that reputation get steadily worse.
The Minister.
Thank you. Ms. Brooke, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship in relation to this important debate. Can I thank the honourable gentleman for the way in which he introduced the debate and place on record my own sense that the Stretford End incident, as we shall call it, is certainly one of the finest amateur goals I've ever seen, and certainly the best I was ever any part of. And the honourable gentleman's generous notification of this when he writes a publication about it, or indeed this sort of debate, has always been touching. And that relationship forged on that common interest has been something that has sustained us over many years where we have been in Parliament together. That, of course, is where it all diverges. And I have to say, although I have always admired the honourable gentleman's passion, his ability in terms of rhetoric to hold an audience, the gentlest I can say is that I think on occasions his passion and his commitment can cloud judgment. And a number of things said during the course of his remarks today I shall endeavour to correct, as I think he took a particular point and extrapolated to a position which I think is genuinely untrue in terms of both fact and United Kingdom position. In the short time available to me, what I would like to do is, just before I deal with some of the specific points mentioned, just put on record our own interest in relationships in the Arab world, because they are difficult and complex. And then I'll deal with some of the specifics. As the House knows well, this is a complex region. Some of the most difficult foreign policy challenges the world faces: nuclear proliferation, Middle East peace process, the appalling war the Assad regime is waging against its own people, ungoverned spaces providing havens for terrorists and extremists, are found in the region. The United Kingdom's security and prosperity are intertwined with the Arab world, A mere 9 miles separate Europe from North Africa at the Mediterranean's narrowest point. Many of the countries in the region are important partners in tackling terrorist threats. Hundreds of thousands of British jobs are linked to trade and commerce with the wider Middle East. It's fundamentally in our national interest that the region becomes more stable, more open, more free and more prosperous over time, and that we have a part to play in that. Our relations with the Middle East are designed to further Britain's security and our prosperity, to deliver opportunities that will create jobs in the UK, to ensure the safety of British nationals overseas and at home. This is the heart of our policy. And we seek to do so in a way that upholds and promotes our values at all times. Our belief in universal human rights, in justice, in equality for women and for minorities. We do so as a matter of principle, but we also know it reinforces our other interests. Over the past 2 years, the region has seen momentous change in the form of the Arab Spring. Change which at its core has been led by the people of the region in a demand for dignity, a voice, a fair prospect of employment. This change was always going to be a long process, yet much has already been achieved. From Tunisia with its democratically elected parliament, Morocco with its free elections, Yemen undergoing a political transition, all of these are genuine achievements. In the region where almost 60% of the population is under 25, the Arab Spring has demonstrated the aspirations of citizens of the region for a voice, a right to share in the prosperity of the 21st century, and that is the same as their peers in other parts of the world. Arab exceptionalism has gone. The UK has been clear in its support for those strengthening the building blocks on which inclusive, accountable societies are based. We're supporting those striving to deliver strengthened rule of law, a thriving civil society, political systems based on genuine citizen participation and a plural, balanced media. Through our Arab Partnership Initiative in Egypt and Libya, we've supported free and fair elections through assistance to domestic observer missions. In Tunisia, we've strengthened legislative protection for the freedom of expression. In Morocco, we're supporting anti-corruption initiatives. The support is based both on our values and a clear understanding that in the long term, a more inclusive, accountable region is more likely to deliver lasting stability and security for the region and for us all. But bringing together our values and interests can at times be a difficult balancing act. Conflicts sometimes arise, as we have many mutual values with the country of the regions, but there are also differences between us. We have different cultures, histories and traditions, and we cannot underestimate the significance of this. And all that has been done in the past may not have been good, and we are paying a price now, in the courts and in terms of public opinion. Where we do not agree on values, however, we need to work this through, dealing with the differences honestly and frankly. We don't see eye to eye on all our values with countries of the Middle East or on any part of the world. In an increasingly interconnected world, security concerns pay no regards to borders. We speak of the global economy, and British nationals live in all parts of the world. Although we may be an island, isolation and disengagement is not an option. We need to work with countries in spite of different beliefs, faiths and value systems in a way that upholds human rights and values, and that can be difficult. Dialogue is the most effective way to find this common ground on areas where we can work together, to encourage where necessary, and to challenge other governments towards policies that are respectful of human rights, justice and equality. This is the approach we're taking, but I do not pretend for a minute that it's not without conflicts and difficulties, and consistency is not an easy aim, nor is it possible always in practice because of the differences in different places. Let me deal, if I may, with one or two of the specifics that the honourable gentleman mentioned. Israel. Yes, I was been a Conservative friend of Israel all the time I've been in Parliament. It does not preclude being a friend of others in the region as well. When I was last with the President of the Palestinian Authority, he said he knew of no other politician who was pursuing the case of the young man killed by a tear gas grenade in Nabi Saleh at the hands of the IDF a couple of years ago. My visits to the family had meant a great deal. I do my best to make sure that our concern for rights and the needs of those in the occupied territories are represented by the United Kingdom. I'm aware of the tensions, and those people who've known my past have been perfectly accommodating in relation to it. It enables me to speak very toughly to the government of the State of Israel. It was I who called in the ambassador recently over settlements. It was in my time as minister holding this job that we're able to support a motion at the United Nations condemning the settlement building against both the United States and Israel. So I will not accept from him, if he does not mind, a sense that my background with Israel leads me into a difficult position in relation to this. And I would remind him that the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Exeter, who held my position some time ago, was no particular noted friend of Israel and was indeed able to do the job as effectively as I hope I'm trying to do.
Don't be hurt by what I said.
No,
I said
I'm not.
it's a qualification. It's a qualification to be the minister for the Middle East. It's not his fault. But why then did the British government abstain, a cowardly abstention, in the overwhelming vote to recognize Palestine as a member of the United Nations? Why then won't he bring sanctions to bear, like the sanctions they've brought to bear on Iran, on Israel for holding illegal nuclear weapons, occupying other people's territory and refusing to leave it? Why not?
In my answer, I was indicating that it's not a requirement for the job, which I think he was indicating a friendship with Israel. And I was pointing to the fact that one of his own colleagues had held the job without such a qualification. The reasons why we didn't support the vote for, not for membership of the United Nations, but to advance the cause of statehood in the Palestinian authorities was because we had explained what we believed were most in the interest of the Palestinian Authority, which was not a vote at the United Nations at that time. But our commitment to the statehood in due course for the Palestinian people is very clear, and I reiterate it again today. Without wishing to stay on that subject and just cover briefly the others, Iran's nuclear programme. I have to say Iran is still acting in defiance of multiple International Atomic Energy Agency resolutions, including the most recent resolution adopted last September and no fewer than 6 UN Security Council resolutions. And the IAEA has expressed its serious concerns about the possible military dimension to Iran's programme. Anyone who mistakes what is going on in Iran and believes it's purely peaceful are missing the point. If it was purely peaceful, it is not difficult for Iran to demonstrate it. And we still hope that during the course of this year they will take the opportunity to do so. But the IAEA has indeed made reference to the possible military dimension of that programme. In relation to Syria, the Honourable Gentleman again went too far. It is not true that the United Kingdom is supplying Al-Qaeda either with money or weapons. I do not believe either that to characterise what is happening in Syria as an attack on the Christian minority is accurate either. There are jihadists involved. It's the wish of the United Kingdom and those of our partners to make sure that they do not get supplied with weapons. That is why we're so determined to see the success of the Syrian National Opposition Coalition, to make sure they have legitimacy, and to make sure that in the political transition of Syria, they have an opportunity to represent the future of Syria. We are more than well aware of, indeed, we're more than well aware of the risks and the danger of jihadists having become involved in what was originally very clearly an expression of reform and opinion against the Assad regime, which has now turned into something different because of the length of time the situation has been unresolved, not through lack of effort by the United Kingdom with the United Nations. And we are extremely concerned for the Christian minority and for others, which is why there must be an effective rule of law, but it must cover all.
A categorical assurance that no British taxpayers' money is finding its way to jihadists through indirect means. In other words, we're giving them some money has been given, not arms, but it finds its way to them. Can you give me that categorical assurance?
Categorical assurance that it is not the intention of the United Kingdom in any efforts being made to support the Syrian people that any money goes to Al-Qaeda or any of its acolytes. It would be logically ridiculous, the United Kingdom, to wish to do anything other than that, which is why we give our support in the way in which we do. No one can be absolutely certain of the suggestion the Honourable Gentleman will make, but it's absolutely clear that the United Kingdom has no interest in doing that. It's totally contrary to our interest, and it is not what the United Kingdom is doing. And for the Honourable Gentleman to say that clearly, that is what we're doing, is simply wrong. I have to finish because we're running out of time. It's a complex issue and a complex set of relationship. It's essential that we're able to deal with this in a way which examines the facts, and sometimes polemics do get in the way. I would say to the Honourable Gentleman that we share a sense of justice for what must happen in the